Okay, so we started with the money class. In the money class, we mentioned that there's some specific details that we looked at on how to read the amount of money that we have. So I just skimmed through that again quickly for the sake of the students who are not in. And then we're going to look at the friend functions. And we're going to do a similar example to what we did previously with the day of year. So we're going to rewrite those functions as member functions, as non-member functions, and as friend functions. Now, if you're up to a point where you can rewrite this function 3 times using those three different approaches, then you are on the safe side. But there are some limitations that we'll understand later on. Later on, we'll understand that there are some functions that ought to be written as friend functions, some functions that ought to be written as member functions or non-member functions. But you'll get a better understanding as we move on. So the example we're looking at is the example 11.3. So let us just skim through that example. So this is the class that we have. It's called money class. 2 friend functions. We'll look at those at a minute. One of them is we add 2 amounts of money and we create a third object. What's the return type over here? The return type is money. The return type is also an object. So this function will take 2 objects. It will add the amount of money. It will create a new object and return it. And there is this equal function. It's also a friend function. It's Boolean. So we'll check if those 2 amounts are the same, and then it will return either true or false. We have 2 constructors, 3 constructors, 1 default, none 2 default constructors, get value, input and output, and there's only one private data member which is called all cents. So the amount is represented in cents. $1, we have 100 cents. And from that we can figure out the number of dollars and the number of cents. There's the digit to integer function that we're going to look at in a minute. So this is her main, and this is how it starts. So we'll ask the user to enter the amount of money. Now at this point the user will enter something like this. So those are valid examples now. So we'll say, for instance, $104.02. This is the format, okay? So it's always 2 digits over here, because you can have a maximum of 99 cents, right? Okay, so the maximum is 99 cents, or you can have 00, okay? But there's also always 2 digits. Of course, there is no limit for the number of digits that we can have over here, because this is the amount of dollars. The amount of dollars can be any number, but the cents over here is 2 digits. We can also have minus, for instance, 12.78. So that's also another valid format. So now the function that we have over here, the input function, it starts by reading the minus sign as a character, the dollar sign as a character as well. It will read this as a long or as an integer. It will read this decimal point as a character, and then it will read those 2 numbers. Those 2 numbers will also be read as characters, and then they're going to be converted into integers. Okay? So the way it's going to read this is character, and then the dollar sign as character as well. This will be read as 1 number, and this will be read as a character, and then 2 characters, and those 2 characters will be converted to numbers. Okay? So right click, go to definition. I did not compile. I don't think this will work. No, we did not compile. Okay. So those are valid examples, as you can see over here, input examples. Okay. So we start by reading 1 character. This 1 character, the first thing that we read can either be the minus sign or it can be the dollar sign. So if it's the minus sign, we're going to set a flag to say that this number is negative. We will need this later on. And then if it's a minus sign, then we're going to go ahead and read the second character, which is the dollar sign. Okay. Otherwise, if it wasn't a minus sign, then the negative amount is false. Okay. Now what we're going to read next is the amount of dollars. The amount of dollars, as you can see over here, is long integer. So we're going to read the amount of dollars followed by the decimal point followed by digit 1, digit 2. Again, guys, digit 1, digit 2 are represented as characters over here. We'll convert them into integers in a minute. Okay. Now if the 1 character, which is the first thing that we read over here, so if this character was not a dollar sign, we're going to generate an error. So if the 1 character is not equal to dollar sign, or the decimal point wasn't equal to dot, maybe it was a comma by mistake, then we're going to generate an error over here and exit the program. Otherwise, we're on the safe side. So we're going to say that the amount of cents that we have is equal to the first digit, we're going to convert it from a character to an integer, and we'll look at this function in a minute. This function will take a character, convert it into a digit. So this digit, we're going to convert it into a character, and we're going to multiply it by 10, and we're going to add it to the second digit, or the value of the second digit. So for example, if what you ended was 0.34, 3, we multiply it by 10, it becomes 30. We add 4 to it, and the total amount will become 34. So the steps are the following. Take this 3, convert it from an integer to a character, sorry, the other way around. Convert it from a character to an integer, multiply it by 10. So 3 will become 30. And then take the 4 and keep it as is, and just simply sum it up with the previous value. So the total amount will become 34. Okay, so this is 34 cents. So now we know that we have 34 cents. Okay, and this 34 cents, we need to add it to the amount of cents that we have in the dollars. As we know, each dollar has 100 cents. So if you multiply the number of dollars by 100 cents, this will give you the amount in cents. So now this is the amount of dollars that we have in cents, plus the 34 that we have previously computed. So now the total amount is stored inside all cents. Where does this all cents come from? This is a private data member, right? Okay. If negative flag was set to false, was set to true, then you just simply multiply this by -1. Okay, otherwise we just leave it as is. So let's look at the function which is called the digit to integer. Digit to integer now. Using this approach. So this is the C. C is a character, you cast it. And 0. So you can either cast using this approach, or you can cast this approach. So if you remember CMP 120, you can either say just integer between parentheses, or say static cast integer between pointed brackets. Both of those, they work for casting. Okay, but I find this one easier. Although this one is, there's something later on which you might come across. There's something called static cast and dynamic cast in C. In C++. So this is why the author is using static cast over here.
So why is the minus static cast here?
This will give you 48. So whatever number you want, you just subtract it from 48. This will also give you 48. So whatever number you have, you're going to subtract it from 48. Okay? Yes. Yes, C is without the single quotation because C is a variable, yes. C is a variable. 0 is not a variable. That's correct.
So number C in this case would be in our example 32, right?
No. In our example, the number that we have is 34, right? So the first time that we call this function, we pass it C is equal to 3. The second time we call this function, we pass it C is equal to 4. We call it for one digit at a time.
Oh, so it's not 30 and...
No, it's called for one digit at a time. Okay. So when we call this function at the top, where was it? Integer to digit, digit 1. Digit to integer, digit 2. So we call it for one digit at a time, not for both of them together. But when we output the amount, now it's the reverse situation. So what we have is the total amount of cents, and then we need to break it down into dollars and cents, and have the dollar sign and the negative sign if needed. Okay. So we have long positive cents. Let's see what this is. We have dollars and we have cents. So the positive cents is equal to, do you remember this function? What is it called? No, it's not labs. This is long absolute value. So it's the absolute value of a long type. Okay. So we take the cents and we convert it to the absolute value of it. The dollars is equal to the positive amount divided by 100. What's the type of the positive cents? It's a long integer, right? What's the type of 100? It's an integer. What's the type of this number? This is a double. Do you remember integer division from CMP 120? If you divide an integer by an integer, the result is always an integer. If there is any fraction, it will be thrown away. Okay, so this will give us the amount of dollars. It will not say you have $1.1. It will say you have $1, and the fraction is thrown away. So if you want to get that fraction, which is the remainder, you just use the modulus separator. So if you take the amount of cents that you have, modulus 100, This says, as you know from CMP 120, remove all the hundreds and give me the remainder. So if you had 205, it will remove the 100, 100, and it will return 5. Okay? So if the total amount you had cents was 205 cents, how many dollars do we have? It's 205. At this point, we'll have 205 divided by 100. And this is integer division. 200 by 5 divided by 100, 2, because the fraction is thrown away. This is integer division. So we know with that we have $2. And then for the total amount of cents, we have 205 modulus 100. This is the remainder of the division. You can also look at it as remove all the hundreds and give me the remainder. How many hundreds do we have? Remove them. What's the remainder? 5. Okay. So now we know that we have $2 and we have 5 cents. So this is the other way. So we in one function we have the dollars and the cents. We want to convert them to cents, and now we have the total amount of cents. We want to convert them to dollars and cents. Let me finish up. Take your question. So all cents, if it's less than 0, and this is all cents. Where is all cents? Oh, where's all cents come from? This is the private data member. Okay. So it's not a parameter. It's a private data member of the object. If it's less than 0, then we're going to print out minus $sign. Otherwise, we're just going to print out $sign. Okay. Now, if the cents that we have, not all cents, the cents, the fraction that we got, the remainder over here. If this amount is less than 10, if all cents is less than 10, it means that it's 5 cents. If you want to print out 5 cents, how do you print it out? This is 5 cents, right? Okay. So if it's less than 10, it has a special arrangement. If it's less than 10, before you print out the 5, print out a 0. Okay. If it's greater than 10, so for instance, if it was 15, you just print it out as 0.15. So there is no need for an additional 0. Okay. Chad, what's your question?
We have 205.32.
Yes.
Divided by 100.
205.
0.32 or point something.
How would you have that? The all cents.
I will remove them.
No. The all cents. It's an integer. It does not contain a fraction.
I mean, when we first read the numbers.
We broke it down into dollars and into cents, and then we summed them up into one variable called all cents. This all cents does not contain fractions.
And so 205 is still dollars, not cents.
Yeah, all cents, Ali. It's called all cents. So the amount is in cents. So if you have 205, it's cents, not dollars. Okay. Yes. It means cast. Do you know what cast is? But you should know what cast is from CMP 120, but that's fine. I'll remind you. Let's assume that you have 2 integers and you want to divide them. So you have integer I and you have integer j, and you just say integer I is equal to, for instance, 10, and j is equal to 3. Okay, and then you have double result is equal to I divided by j. Now what we have over here, this is an integer division because we're dividing an integer by an integer. So if you divide 10 by 3, you lose the fraction. Okay, so the answer will be 3 because this is an integer division. This is not a correct answer. So what you need to do, you need to convert this type from integer to double. If you want to convert the type from integer to double, you use something called casting. So I'm going to convert the type now from j from integer to double. So this is how I cast. So just simply have between 2 parentheses a different type. The type of j was integer, and now I'm saying convert the integer type to double and then do the division. So now I'm not dividing 10 by 3, I'm dividing 10 by 3.0. 3.0 is a double. This is no longer an integer division, and then this number will contain the fraction. Yes? You can use what? MATLAB? To do what? Okay, but the question was about casting. That's I didn't try it. I don't know. If you know about it, then that's fine. Okay. But now let's compile this example and run it. Okay. So let's see if it compiles. one failed. Snaked from somewhere. Another syntax error. This is a link error. Most likely this is the error that I mentioned previously. So you just can right click, properties, linker, and remove the incremental link. Again, if you're using a newer version of Visual Studio, I don't think you'll encounter this, but just in case you come across it, this is how we solve it. Okay, so it compiles. Let's just run it to get us started. Start without debugging. Okay, so we can enter something like this. Okay, so this is the amount that you've entered, and this is another amount. Now it's going to compare between them, and obviously one of them is different than the other. So at this point it's called different function, which is called are they equal or not. Okay, so then it says that one of us is richer, because the function returns a boolean, but it doesn't say which amount is larger. And then it adds to two amounts. Again, this is a friend function, and it will return a new object. This is a new object. It just simply adds the total amount of cents that we have in the first object to the total number of amount of cents in the second object. It will create a third object, and it will return it. Okay, and then it will print it out. So let's look at the friend functions now. Zoom in. Okay, so the two friend functions are add and equal. Again, you know this, but what does it mean to have a friend function? A friend function is a non-member function that has access to the private data members. Okay? And we gave an analogy which is that sometimes you share your secrets with friends, right? So although the friend is not a family member, so it's a non-member function. Okay? Nonetheless, sometimes you share secrets with your friends. So this is a friend function. It's a non-member function, yet it has access to the private data members. Okay. So what does it mean to say that it's a non-member function? It means that when you define it, you don't say that this is coming from the money class. You don't do this, because this is not a member function. Immediately you'll have a syntax error. If you do this, you're saying that this is a member function. It's not a member function. A friend function is a non-member function that has access to private data members. Okay, so this is how you declare it. Okay. Now we have two amounts over here, amount 1 and amount 2, and there's the equal as well. Equal is easier, we start with the equal. So we're having two amounts, amount 1 and amount 2. But we're going to take amount 1 and access its all cents, and we're going to take amount 2 and access its all cents and compare between them. If they are equal, we're going to return true, otherwise we're going to return false. The function is as simple as that. Okay? But can we do this if we say cout all cents? Does it work? Jad is saying, isn't it a Boolean function? Jad, what does the cout statement has to do with the Boolean function type? It's not? It's not a friend function? It is a friend function. Notice. Friend functions, they have access to private data members. What's the problem? Notice. There's no calling object, right? How come there's no calling object? Because this is a non-member function. Okay. The way that the function is called. Add and equal. Is there a calling object? Did we say your amount control copy, control V? Did we say your amount dot equal? There is not the your amount dot equal. If we say your amount dot equal, it means that we have a calling object. Now, if we have a calling object inside this function, inside equals, when we say cout all cents, then we're referring to the all cents of the calling object. But this is a non-member function, so there is no calling object. Of the class, so there is no calling object. If there is no calling object, then we cannot refer to all sense. All sense of which object? And when we say all sense over here, obviously we're referring to this object. And when we write all sense over here, obviously we're referring to this object. Yes? Yes, of course. We can see out amount 1 dot all sense by all means. Because we know that we're referring to the all sense of this particular object. We spent the full last lecture explaining this, and of course we explained it before many times. If until this point still you don't understand this concept, see you next semester. Okay. So this is the all sense from the two objects that we have, and we're just comparing the all sense. If they are equal, we're going to return true, meaning that both of them are the same amount. Otherwise, we're going to return false. So let's look at the other function now, which is the equals. Where is it? The other function is the add amount. So this is the add friend function. Again, this is a non-member function, so we cannot call it this way because it's a non-member function, or your amount, your money, or whatever it is. Non-member function, it means that we just call it as if you're calling a regular function from CMP 120. So this is add, and we're passing it two objects. And this function obviously will create a third object and return it. So what we have on the left hand side over here, it has to be an object. So look at the declaration of, where is this declared? Go to declaration. Yeah. So our amount is of type money as well. Okay. So let's look at the definition of the function, which is add. So right click, go to definition. Okay. So now we have money 1 and money 2. We create a new object. We take the all sense from the first amount and all sense from the second amount, and we store it in the all sense of the new object that we have created. And then we return the new object that we created. We create an object, we calculate the total amount of sense based on those two objects, and then we return it. And as you can see over here, the return type is money, and what we are returning is also of type money, so there is no type mismatch. Okay? Fine. Jad, can we print out the all sense over here?
No.
Why not?
Because it's not a member function.
It's not a member function. But this all sense, to which object does it belong? The one underlined in red.
To the money.
Which money? Which money class?
Private.
To which object does it belong? Notice. To which object does it belong? There's no object called amount.
There's no object called in the first place.
There's no object calling the function in the first place, which means we cannot. Exactly. This does not exist because there's no calling object. Okay. If in main we had object.add, then this variable, which is called all sense, will belong to the calling object. But there's no calling object. So how come there's no calling object? Because this is a non-member function. It does not belong to the class. The friend function is a non-member function. It's a regular function. As if you created a function in CMP 120 and you're calling it. It has nothing to do with object orientation as such. Okay. Now let's take this non-member function, which is called, let's take one of them. Will it work for add? It would work for add, and it would also work for equals. Let's rewrite both of them as member functions. If you write both of them as member functions, it means that we have a calling object. Let's see. So let's start with that. And I'm going to create a function, but this will return something of type money, right? Now if we have a calling object, and then it will add them and return a third one. Let's see how it goes. Okay. So we're going to make it a member function. So we're going to remove the friend keyword. It's going to return something of type money. It's going to be called add, and let's call it member add, or add as a member. As a member. So add as a member function. Now, in this case, this will be the calling object. When we have a calling object and we call add, the way that we're going to call it in main, it looks like this. So you'll have my amount, for instance, dot add as a member, and we pass it amount 2. So when we call it in main, it will look something like this. Which two amounts are we going to add? Of course, there has to be something on the left-hand side, right? Because it returns result RST is equal to. So in main, we'll have something similar to this. So we're going to add two amounts and return them inside a left-hand object, which is of type money. So result is equal to my amount.add as a member. We used capital A, let's make it small a. Which two amounts are we adding? We're adding my amount, which is the calling object, to amount 2, right? And then we're going to store the result and return it to RST. But let's see if we can implement this function. So we have add, and next to add now, we have our own new function, amount 2. This is a member function, right? So if it's a member function, we have to indicate that it comes from this class scope. Okay. Now let's cut and paste this code and modify it for us to understand the differences between the two. Okay, so we create the object that we need to return, and temp that all sense is equal to. That's the only change we need. Let's understand this change. Now, all sense, where does it come from? From the calling object. Where's the calling object? The calling object is this. Object dot. This is the calling object. So now in the code over here, what is it? Add as a member function. This all sense now, it belongs to the calling object. And the other all sense, it comes from the, from amount 2. Everything else is the same.
This all sense is the only correct that we have?
Yes. So now let's try this in main. Let's see how to call this function in main. So in main we added two amounts. Can you see that function? Input, output, and then equal, and then add. Here's add. Now let's call our own function. So I'm just going to cut and paste this and say add as a member function. This is a non-member function call as a friend call, but we don't call it this way now. We have a calling object. And we pass it only. It's called add as a member. So now we have the calling object, so we no longer have the first argument because the first argument is now the calling object. Dot add as a member, and we pass it the calling object your amount, the parameter is my amount, or the argument is my, and we're storing the result inside. Everything else is the same, right? So our amount, C out equals, everything else is the same. As a member function. .23. So the summation of two amounts is 22.32, and if you do it again as a member function, we should get the same result exactly. If you get something else, you did something wrong. Okay? So now we have a friend function. We rewrote it as a member function. Let's rewrite it as a non-member function. So if we rewrite it as a non-member function, where do I declare it? Inside the class? Can I declare it over here? No. A non-member function has to be outside the class. It has nothing to do with the class. So I'm just going to copy this now and put it outside the class, or just after the class, before main, should I call. It's not a friend function, so I'm going to remove this. Call it non-member function. Okay. So now what we need to do is, this is not a friend function, so it does not have direct access to the private data members. Let's copy the code and modify it to understand the difference between the two. So this was the friend function, and now this is a non-friend function. If it's a non-friend function, it means that we cannot have direct access to the private data members. So the only difference is, instead of accessing all sends directly, we need to access all sends through the function which is called, there has to be a get something, right? Get value. I assume it's get value. Get value. Okay. So how can we solve this problem now? Still we don't have direct access to temp. Is there a set function? I'm not sure if there is a set function. If not, we have to create one. All sends, get values, input, output. There's no set function. We have to add one. Okay. Set all sends, and we pass it this amount. Right? So we don't have such a function. Let's implement it. It's a member function, so just after we have get, we can also have set. What does it return? And it takes an integer that's long. Takes long since. What does it do? To just simply say that all since equals, that's it. So now as a non-member function, temp.set all sends, and we just pass it the summation of the two amounts and we return it. So let's call this function in main now. And let's repeat this. So this is as a non-member function now. This is the name of the function. And let's see how we can call it. There is no calling object, right? Because this is a non-member object. It's a non-member function. So we need just to pass it. So this is a regular function. It's just similar to CMP 120. And we just call it as a regular function. Okay? And of course, the non-member function, and this is add as, and it will print out the result. So let's just over here say that this is a non-member function. Of course, now we expect the result to be the same, otherwise we did something wrong. So we have 1,200. There's something wrong, right? But let's go back and figure out what went wrong. Okay, go to definition. Let's see what's this function. We used it without understanding what it does, right? Oh, get value. It retains the amount in dollars. So let's add a function called get cents, and we'll just return the cents. Just like we have set cents, let's have return cents. So we just use the function without even reading the declaration of it, without reading the documentation of it, which is wrong. So this is get all cents, and it returns something of type long, and we just simply return all cents. Right, so we have set function, and you can align them for ease of readability. So we have get all cents, that we just simply return amount of cents. So let's go back to our function and modify it. So this is as a number function, and just get all cents and get all cents. Control save. Start without debugging. So let's enter the same amount again. Point what? Yeah, so 646464 exactly. So now we're on the safe side, right? Okay, so now we did it correctly. And it goes without saying, guys, that when you study this and you repeat everything that we did, of course this is the way that you have to study. What you can also do in addition to that is to the equal function also repeat it as a member function as a non-member function. So let's make a stop here now, and I'll answer any questions that you have, and I'll see you guys.